So, as I was mentioning that Sanat Kumar has already answered the second question, which is about how to make rapid advancement in spiritual life. And the answer that Sanat Kumar gave um, had two levels. One is at the level of directly emphasizing on the devotional activities.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I think we are fine. So Sanat Kumar um, explained those five things that he stated in the verse number 22, what one should be doing, and then he elaborates that by highlighting on the qualities that one needs to have in order to do those devotional activities properly. But everything was centered around hearing, hearing about the Supreme Lord. And now Sanat Kumar is answering the first question, which is what entails the the good fortune for a soul who is entrapped within matter. What truly signifies the good fortune? So in the 36th verse, Srila Prabhupada stresses the the aspect of leaving the world of matter to attain spiritual world as being a worthy goal to pursue. He writes there that we should try to get out of the material cosmic manifestation, go to the spiritual world and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is our highest achievement. We should not be attracted by anything material, higher or lower, but should consider them all on the same level. So in other words, as far as the material world is concerned, there is no question of higher or lower. They're fundamentally all at the same level. Our real engagement should be in inquiring about the real purpose of life and rendering devotional service to the Lord. Thus, we will be eternally blessed in our spiritual activities, full of knowledge and bliss. And then in the later, he says that at the present moment, human civilization is too much attached to economic development and sense gratification, as therefore nearing the path of ruination. So that's how the purport ended. So now Sanat Kumar is telling Maharaj Pṛthu that one should try to understand the super soul, who is the same as Bhagavan, because he lives in everyone's heart, no matter what kind of body that one may inhabit. And this super soul is awaiting the souls to turn towards him. And therefore, Sanat Kumar explains the power and the position of the super soul, that he is the cause and effect of everything, and everything, including everything in the body. And then he also says that he is one with everything, and yet simultaneously different from it. So one should know the position of the Supreme Lord as all pervading, all powerful, and that the super soul is eternally transcendental to the material creation and situated in pure internal energy. That's what is stated in the 38th verse. Unto him only must one surrender. So In other words, we have to learn to depend on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His power for us to go from where we are in this contaminated atmosphere of the material world to where we want to go, which is the supreme spiritual planet of Goloka Vrindavan, and which is the field of internal energy for the Supreme Lord. And therefore, we have to recognize that ultimately that journey can be covered by surrender. So, how can we um, muster enough courage to go down that path? Because by the force of time and the nature of the material energy, we are guaranteed to lose everything we possess. So, how can we, whatever time has been given, we can do the right thing? So, 39th and the 40th verse, these are the texts which are, I would say, the most important texts of this chapter. And particularly the 39th verse, it is a oft quoted verse of Srila Prabhupada. So the 39th verse gives some very interesting secret of how one can uproot the deep knotted desires that we have, which entangles us in this material world. And this verse is basically the answer to what awakens the soul's good fortune. That the devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord are very easily or can very easily overcome hard knotted desires for fruitive activities. So this the specific phrase that is used is karma ashrayam udgrathayanti. In fact, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur uses this word deracinate. Deracinate generally means you uproot something really from its root. In other words, there is no possibility for those desires to come back. And this verse is quoted to show that only devotional service has the potency to remove the material desires from its roots with no possibility for them to come back. While the jnanis and the yogis, they may be trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, but they are unable to do so. And therefore, firmly, Sanat Kumar is advising Pṛthu Mahārāja to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. And that's why this verse is so significant. It distinguishes the process of Bhakti Yoga from other processes like Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga and other processes. That only Bhakti Yoga has this kind of caliber to overcome the hard knotted desires for fruitive activities. So Prabhupada naturally expands this in his purport to 39th verse. So he writes that one can give up inferior desires when engaged in superior desires. To try to stop desires is impossible. One has to desire the supreme in order not to be entangled in inferior desires. Jnanis maintain a desire to become one with the supreme, but such desire is also considered to be kama or lust. Similarly, the yogis desire mystic power, and that is also kama. This is the bhukti mukti siddhi kami shakali ashanto. So that's the expansion of that verse. And the bhaktas, not being desirous of any sort of material enjoyment, become purified. There is no artificial attempt to stop desire. Desire becomes a source of spiritual enjoyment under the protection of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is stated herein by the Kumāras that the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the ultimate reservoir of all pleasure. And we can at this point recall what was the source of transformation for the hearts of the four Kumāras. It is the aroma of the tulsi leaves coming from the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So they have sufficiently meditated on the toes of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And that's so their heart is coming out in this particular verse. Why the attention is paid to the toes of the lotus feet. We can relate to their own transformation. So there is no artificial attempt to stop desire. Desire becomes a source of spiritual enjoyment under the protection of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is stated herein by the Kumāras that the lotus feet of the Lord, of Lord Krishna, are the ultimate reservoir of all pleasure. One should therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord instead of trying unsuccessfully to stop desire for material enjoyment. As long as one is unable to stop the desire for material enjoyment, there is no possibility of becoming liberated from the entanglement of material existence. It may be argued that the waves of a river are incessantly flowing and that they cannot be stopped. And this same idea is also expressed in the second chapter, 78th verse, right? That apuryamanam achala pratishtham. That particular verse, Bhagavad Gita also states the same thing. There is a constant flow of desires. The waves of a river are incessantly flowing, and that they cannot be stopped. But the waves of the river flow toward the sea. When the tide comes over the river, it overwhelms the flowing of the river, and the river itself becomes overflooded. And the waves from the sea become more prominent than the waves from the river. Similarly, a devotee with intelligence plans so many things for the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness that stagnant material desires become overflooded by the desire to serve the Lord. This is such a beautiful description of why this process works in comparison with the path of the Gyanis and the path of the yogis, why it is very difficult for those processes to attain victory over the force of desires. And then in the 40th verse, they are offering their final words of instructions, which is filled with weight, that the ocean of nations is very difficult to cross because it is infested with many dangerous sharks. What are these dangerous sharks? The sharks represent the particularly the different varieties of dangers to one's self-realization, including the attraction for the opposite sex. Although those who are non-devotees undergo severe austerities and penances to cross that ocean, we recommend that you simply take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are like boats for crossing the ocean. Although the ocean is difficult to cross, by taking shelter of his lotus feet, you will overcome all dangers. So, in other words, it is establishing Bhakti Yoga, not Jnana Yoga, as the actual process for attainment of the absolute truth, because after all, one has to cross over the incessant forces of the desire that is there while we are living in this material world. So Srila Jiva Goswami also has commented in Bhakti Sandarbha in this context, where he explains further how Sanat Kumar has established bhakti after having explained the path of jnana. And there Srila Jiva Goswami argues that the two paths, the devotional service and impersonal speculation, they have the same goal, and the goal is to cross the ocean of nations. But the Gyan Marg is difficult, whereas the Bhakti Marg carries the practitioner to the destination by its own accord. So the impersonalists, they desire to cross the ocean of nations, but they are factually unable to do so. So in other words, the impersonalists, or those who are following the path of jnana, they carry the same goal as the bhakti yogi in the sense that to cross over the nations, but they remain unsuccessful. But a bhakti yogi, because the practice itself entails so much of power coming from taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, they end up becoming victorious. So a doubt may be raised that that in the Shruti Shastras, so this is coming from Srila Sridhar Swami, that a doubt may be raised that the Shruti Shastras, particularly the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says that one who understands Brahman attains the Supreme. So how is it possible that yogis and the jnanis cannot overcome their hard-knotted desires for fruitive activity? So Sridhar Swami responds that that this particular text number 40 is specifically directed towards answering this objection, that why a jnani or a yogi cannot overcome their hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. So in text 40, there is a phrase aplava isham. So aplava isham refers to those who have not taken shelter of the boat which is representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So aplava isham, so plava refers to the boat. So aplava isham means those who have not taken shelter of that boat to cross the ocean of nations. Therefore, such persons find it difficult to cross on their own accord, although they had hoped that their difficult yoga practices would become suffice to carry them across this shark-filled ocean, right? And the sharks, again, particularly refer to the five senses and the mind, because they are the sort of medium through which the desires are acting. So because of the five senses in the mind, which are like the sharks in the ocean of material existence, it becomes difficult to cross over. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead is acting as the boat. But if you don't take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how can you hope to cross? And that's the point. Therefore, one should take the boat of the Lord's lotus feet to cross that difficult ocean. And so this difficult ocean is characterized by this dustara arnam. Dustara means difficult to cross, and arnam means the ocean. And the phrase that is actually indicative of the shelter is really udupam, which essentially means again the boat of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So there is on one hand, there is aplava isham, where people who may be engaged in some kind of process of self-realization, like jnana or dhyana and all these processes, but they belong to the category of aplava isham. And on the other hand, the devotees, they are taking shelter of the boat of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, and therefore they are able to cross over the difficult ocean. So let's just quickly read what Srila Prabhupada has to say in that purport, number 40, that although there are many methods or boats by which one can cross the ocean, the Kumāras recommend that the king take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, just as one would take shelter of a good boat. Non-devotees, and these non-devotees include um, the jnanis and the yogis as well. Non-devotees meaning one who is not ready to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, they are not devotees. So non-devotees who do not take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet try to cross the ocean of nations by other methods like karma, jnana, and yoga. But they have a great deal of trouble. On the other hand, anyone who takes to the process of devotional service and has faith that the lotus feet of the Lord are safe boats to cross that ocean is certain to cross very easily and comfortably. Pṛthu Maharaj is therefore advised to take shelter or to take the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord to easily cross over all dangers. Dangerous elements in the universe are compared to sharks in the ocean. Even though one may be a very expert swimmer, he cannot possibly survive if he is attacked by the shark. So again, the attacks are what? The attacks are desires which are stored in the mind, essentially. Along with the mind, the five senses, they're driving us crazy. So that's where the deep knotted desires are. Um, so this is a wonderful formula that is given in this section. I took some time because this 39th verse and 40th verse are the most important verses of this chapter, and you see how the 39th verse particularly brings out the secret of awakening all good fortune for the conditioned soul who is entrapped in this material world. Thank you very much.